Hi everyone! Welcome to This Week in the TERF Wars with me, Katie Montgomery. This is the second episode of 2021, which is exciting, and of our second season. So if you're new, this show is basically I go through the tweets, well, not just tweets, the news, which is mainly in the form of tweets, basically what the nonsense that gender critical people and transphobes and TERFs have been up to this week. We'll just look at their arguments, we'll laugh at some of them, we'll explain why some of them are wrong, and that's basically it. So throughout the whole thing, I've got like screenshots obviously, and I've anonymized all of them, so please don't go and find these people and argue with them or harass them or anything. You know, lots of them are shit people, but we're here to discuss their arguments and laugh at how rubbish they are, and we're not here to discuss certain people, unless of course they're celebrities or big names. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing great, and we'll move straight on with it. So let's hope there's no technical difficulties this week. So I actually wanted to include this last week, but I forgot. Because usually I only look from the Friday until the Thursday. So this is all the stuff since last Friday until yesterday. And anything that's happened today is going to appear in next week's episode. And obviously last Friday was New Year's, and that started at midnight with everyone counting in 2021. Get rid of 2020 because it's rubbish. And I forgot about this. This is a new record. Just 5 minutes after midnight, some absolute loser wrote a whole flipping tweet out to me. So I just said, Happy New Year, mates. Everyone, Happy New Year to all of you. But we said that last week. And this person decided to, Happy New Year, Katie Montgomery. Maybe you can turn over a new leaf for a better life. Not a woman, not a feminist. Leave women alone. Like, it's just so pathetic. And I thought this was hilarious, so obviously I posted it saying, like, only took 5 minutes for someone to get so offended at trans people existing that they had to do this. But actually, while I was writing this and laughing at this, someone actually unbelievably, oh no, I've lost the code already. Someone unbelievably topped that. And sorry, I'm just connecting. Right. Someone actually unbelievably topped that. And they actually, so they replied, this person replied 25 minutes after New Year's. So that's, or something like half an hour after. So that's pretty sad. And they did an equally sad message of Happy New Year, men are not women. Like, you know, just have to get offended, adult human female account. But what tops the first person? Like, they were a little slower, but the reason they were slower is because they were busy making an account. They made an account after New Year's. While everyone else is celebrating the New Year, and I know it was a rubbish New Year because, you know, everyone's locked down and you're probably just with the one person you live with or on Zoom chat or something. But like, is this really the best of your time to be making and actually wasting time following people? And they actually got a follower. So within 25 minutes of the New Year, this person had made a new account and followed a load of people and retweeted some garbage and written their little smug little pin tweet here, TERF is a slur, and then sent me some hate mail. So it's good to know, however pathetic and bad your life is going, at least you're not this pathetic. So that was quite funny. Just imagine, like, I thought being sent a tweet at 1 a.m. on Christmas Day was pretty pathetic. I'm not sure, like, this is up there. It's between this and that one that we covered at Christmas. Unreal. Imagine your life being this possessed by having to hurt trans people. It's so weak. Anyway. Right, so now we're into the stuff. So I would like to have included that last time just because it's like a New Year's thing. But anyway, now we're on. So this is all from 2021. And this is a good start. This is from, we can remember this Brexit guy because he's going to come up in again next, I think. So I just thought this is brilliant. This guy's got two in a row that are just so perfectly gender critical, like the gender critical movement. This is some angry man, and he said, "You need to read a simpler biology book than that." And then he makes a suggestion. Claire Rayner's The Body Book tells you all you need to know without the distracting anti-TERF science. Like, all this stupid science is getting in the way of my beliefs. Like, amazing. And it just imagine writing that, like, oh, your biology book is too complicated and disagrees with me, so we need a simpler one that isn't full of all this anti my view propaganda. Like, mate, your view is just garbage. Like, anyway, the reason that I remembered this guy, and when I saw this, I thought it was hilarious, because I also remember, so this is one of the tweets that got cut off last week. This guy also replied. So there's been a situation in the UK. We've got several different political parties, not just two, which is good. And the Green Party's currently having this like internal battle about whether trans people are worth helping or not. And so this is one of the politicians involved, who is anti-trans. That's not particularly interesting here, but what is interesting is this guy, Mr. Brexit, who was just saying biology is too complicated for his ideology, said, "TERFs are the only feminists I can bear. Keep up the good work." And I just think that's so perfect. Like, it just totally sums up how this isn't a feminist movement. There's so many guys like this. So many, like, particular gender critical men. Like, they hate feminists. They hate everything feminists stand for, everything, all feminist positions and ideology and everything. They're opposed to all of it. They're generally misogynists. I don't know enough about this guy to make that observation. But then they are, of course, gender critical. Because, like, when you're already a misogynist and a homophobe, being a transphobe isn't much of a step. And then there are these people thinking, like, some of them may be feminists in some sense. That's something for you to debate in the comments. But whether you're a feminist, gender critical person or not, you must know that, like, the most ardent anti-feminists are pro-gender critical positions. We all know it. If you just imagine, like, the stereotype of some misogynistic prick that you meet down the pub or whatever, like, no one thinks, oh, he's probably a misogynist, a homophobe, and a trans rights activist. Like, it's just nonsense. You know that they hold gender critical views because it's just the reactionary position. Anyway, moving on. So this is so tedious. This has happened a few times, and I actually have a policy of blocking people who do this. So here someone was making a comment about fascism in general, not making any accusations. They were just saying that there's some overlap with Holocaust denial, blah, 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 blah. And then gender critical person here comes along and says, who's denying the Holocaust? And they were like, read it again. I wasn't actually saying anyone was. I was just making some comment about the language. Like, that's the general context. But anyway, I said, well, there is actually one gender critical conspiracy theory that trans people weren't killed by the Nazis in the Holocaust. And I've encountered it a few times, and some of them go as far as saying the Nazis were pro-trans rights. They usually send, there's this one photo of some Nazi officers cross-dressing, and they're like, there you go, see? Proves the entire Nazi movement was pro-trans rights because some men cross-dressing. Total nonsense. But anyway, so I said, well, there is this conspiracy theory, and then this person's like, trans rights activists are appropriating the Holocaust. Nothing is too low for them. So they're literally now doing what they were just asked, like, who's denying the Holocaust, mate? It's you. It's like they were looking for an opening to come in and deny the Holocaust, which is nonsense. But just so on that, like, in case anyone doesn't know, this is like one of the most famous photos of book burning. When you talk about book burning, people often think of the Nazis, and they often think of this photo. And this photo is where they're burning a load of books from this institute, which I'm not going to try and say the name because it's German. Perhaps someone will write it in the comments. But this was like the research centre for studying like LGBT issues, and particularly trans people and trans issues and understanding about trans people. And the Nazis came in, burnt all of the books. They killed the people there, which like several of the people working there were trans people. But also importantly, this place had a list of names and addresses, which is such a terrible idea, of all of the like trans people and other LGBT people that they had helped. This was, as well as a research centre, it was also like, helping people basically. And then they used that list to go and hunt down and kill all of the LGBT people, including trans people. Like, they were focused on gay people, for sure. But this was also in a time when the line between what a gay person and a trans person was much like considered socially to like they're just kind of the same thing. Which is also worth pointing out that while gender critical people are saying, oh, they only targeted gay people, they didn't target trans people, they're often then saying, at the same time, the same people making the same, making that argument will also be saying, well, there's no such thing as a trans person, they're just confused gay people or people, straight people with a fetish. And so you're saying that trans people are gay people anyway, and you're also saying gay people could, it's just nonsense. It's just a chance to, like, they want to do everything they can to deny the oppression of trans people in every single way because, obviously, because they're complicit in it. And that always involves historical revisionism of trying to, deny the horrific events of the past, as well as denying what they're doing today, even whilst they do it and look you in the eye while they do it, which is obviously pathetic. But you got to do a shot every time I say pathetic. And then here's another person. Nonsense. Transsexuals didn't exist before the 1940s via Nazi anti-gay human experimentation. Like, the actual level of this conspiracy theory where they think the Nazis invented trans people. Like through some experimentation. It just, how do people believe this? It's just so garbage. The rest is it's just nonsense. It's just such a joke. Like the first ever gender reassignment surgery was like decades before this. It was like 1931 or something. This just makes no sense. It doesn't match with the history. It doesn't match with the Nazis' ideology. It doesn't match with anything. It's just a chance to deny the experiences, like the historical oppression of trans people, and then come up with some wacky idea of like, trans people don't really exist. It's all a Nazi plot to take over the world, which is funny. Keep that in mind. Keep the Nazis created trans people in mind, because we're going to come back to that this episode. So, right, we've got a few random takes from the week, and then we've got like a couple of themes coming up later on. So this is another random one. So I was talking about how trans women have always used women's spaces. So here I've said, trans women and girls have always used single-sex facilities and have shared with you your whole life. And like a common, ridiculous, gender-critical claim is that makes them unisex facilities, which it obviously doesn't, because if that was the case, then that would mean we never had sex-segregated facilities, and we do. Especially when they're always claiming of wanting to defend what we have. Anyway, and then this person said, not in Dublin, that's for sure. Besides the gay bars. Knowing the attitude of your average Dublin mammy, as I do, if a trans woman entered the ladies' changing room or toilet, they would be escorted out pronto. Blah, blah, blah. I'm just stating a fact. This is such a, like, the whole, like, the majority of gender critical people really do think that trans people are like some new thing. Like, up until 2018, there was just men and there was just women and it was just normal. Maybe there was a few hypothetical transsexuals which somehow do and don't exist at the same time, and they're kind of like, oh, this mystical version that I've created in my mind, which is a contradiction. But there was just men and women, and then all of a sudden, these people started demanding to use different spaces, and they're trying to change the way of the world, and it's just rubbish. Like, shout out to any trans people from Dublin who have been out longer than since 2018 or whenever this, like, some of them genuinely think even today trans people in Dublin aren't using the toilet in public. I mean, well, they're not today because it's locked down, but it's just saying, look, where do you think trans people have been going to the toilet? Like, it never makes sense. It never even begins to make sense. And look, this is another classic example of, well, I've never seen a trans person in the toilets. You haven't been paying attention anyway, full stop. But also, most trans people you won't notice because they're just getting on with their daily business. And even, that passing is a complex topic, but, people pass to different degrees. And often you'll pass when you're just walking around the streets and going to the toilet in public facilities in a way that you might not pass, say, in a one-on-one conversation with someone. And they've got this idea that passing is like 1 in a million. And even then it's like, you can always tell in real life when I could always tell. So it's just like confirmation bias nonsense. Embarrassing. Oh, this one was funny. Transphobe is the new feminazi. They're so desperate to link trans people up with men's rights activists and say that somehow trans people are part of the patriarchy. Just imagine writing this. Just imagine writing the irrational prejudice against trans people as an accusation is the same as feminazi, which is some slur for feminists from like 2010. Do I really need to explain this one? It's embarrassing. Like when I saw this, I actually thought like, oh, I could dismantle. And I just thought, I'm not going to dismantle this. I'm literally just going to laugh at this because it's so dumb. It's embarrassing that people think of this and they actually think that that's a thing. Nonsense. So I think this person has a couple of things here. I always try and match the smiley faces up. So if it's the same face, it's the same person within an episode. So this person has been linked one of my articles explaining something, my sourced articles that provide the evidence that you can just click on and see yourself. They've said, anyway, Katie's article is full of inaccuracies, falsehoods, and outright lies. But then I propose he has to do that, or everyone else will I actually think that's meant to be the word C, or everyone else will see Katie is just an average man trying to infiltrate spaces. Well, here I am, the average man. I think you would agree that when you just imagine a man, like someone's like, think of a man. This is what you think of, obviously. They try and make these insults, and like when you are constantly calling women, both cis and trans women, when you're calling women men all day, it kind of loses its power. I mean, it's just completely powerless anyway, but you get this feeling that's not, so you have to escalate it. So you've not got to just say, oh, you're not just saying that I'm, a man in a dress or whatever their standard insult is. They've got to say that I'm an average man. And then the more they step it up, the more just like utterly ridiculous it becomes. So my reply to this was actually something like, the average man with his breasts and vagina, which I just want to comment on because they then tried to spin that as, oh, Katie's trying to be transphobic and saying men can't have breasts and vagina. Like, obviously that's not what I'm saying. I'm commenting on the word average. If you said, oh, you're just like, no, there is a thing where the word normal comes up, and I will always argue that trans people are normal, like trans people who have fully transitioned to normal, trans people who haven't transitioned to normal, and everywhere in between. Being trans is just a normal thing. Like, normal is kind of a rubbish word, and some people don't like to use the word normal at all. And some people, like I try and just use the word normal all the time because being trans is normal. If there's any sensible... Right. Okay. Oh, technical difficulties are so frustrating. Right. I don't know how much of that last one you heard. Oh no, what's happening now? Right, okay. We're back to the start. 1 second. Where were we? Let's move on to this one. I'm really sorry, everyone. It's so frustrating. I don't know what the issue is. My internet cut out at the end of the last stream and it just cut out this time. And like I've been on the internet all day and it hasn't cut out, and it's just randomly cut out in the middle of a live stream twice in a row. So frustrating. Anyway, right, so I was saying, oh, okay, you heard Until Normal. I was just explaining the difference between like a normal person, well, not a normal person, saying that trans people are normal. I would argue that if there's any, either we don't use the word normal at all because it's rubbish, or when we talk about normal, obviously trans people are normal because it's a normal human thing. And that's different from the word average, which can have, like, in colloquially, they can mean the similar things. But I would argue that, like, in a mathematical sense, like, you can have, like, an average person. You could have someone who's an average height for a man or an average height for a woman. And that's the difference that I was arguing there. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on to this one. Right, okay. Get back in the zone. Oh, so this is important because of the... actually, it's related to the last one. So... Oh no, I've got more technical difficulties. Why is this happening to me? Piece of shit. Oh, fucking hell. Sorry, everyone. What is going on? It's bullshit. Oh, this is so annoying. I'm really not sure what to say. Why does it just not work? Well, I will try without. So, anyway, let's try without and see what I can do. So, this was the last person, and they were saying that I'm the average man. Anyway, on to the next thing. They then tweeted, after saying to me that I'm the average man, they then tweeted on their own timeline to everyone, all of their gender critical followers, quick question, if Montgomery wasn't born a man, how is he trans? So is he actually a girl lying, desperate for attention and lying about her transness, or is he lying to himself? So you were just telling me that I'm the average man and you literally don't even know if I'm a trans woman or not. And then, to add to the hilarity of them being in a total muddle and completely owning themselves here, like accusing me of being an average man and then not even being sure if I'm a trans woman or a cis woman, their follower then replied, if he wasn't born with a vagina, then yep, it's a she. So, like, absolute confusion here. None of them really know what's going on. They're just reacting. They're just accusing a random woman of being a man and then getting confused between a trans man and a trans woman and then accusing them of being a woman anyway. Nonsense. Oh gosh, I didn't censor this person out. I'm very sorry, Tea Junkie. I think you should all go and follow Tea Junkie. I don't really know them, but I'm sorry for not blanking you out. Anyway, this was another one of these ridiculous gender critical memes where they just always talk about this idea that trans women are going into women's bathrooms to rummage through the bins for used sanitary products. It's so disgusting. It's so ridiculous. The idea that this is a thing and they all just convinced it is, and they have to create this idea of a trans person who is a pervert because that's, that's part of their thing. In order to feel justified in opposing trans rights, they have to say all trans people are perverts and that's why we have to ban them. So then they have to come up with all these nonsense stories, and they probably found a post on 4chan from like 2007 or something about someone who made up some story like this, and then it just becomes canon, and now all of a sudden it's common for trans people. And as soon as you mention a trans person, we have to talk about how they like to go and rummage in the bins. And to add to this being obviously nonsense and a complete joke and not related to anything to do with this, like, if you made a law banning trans women from the toilets, even if they were, like some of them, enough of them, were rummaging through bins, that isn't going to stop them. They're going to go and rummage through the bins anyway. Like, if you're rummaging through bins, then there's a lot wrong with you, and you're not going to be stopped by the nonsense law. It just doesn't make any sense. But they just believe the most ridiculous things. Oh, this is a funny little... So this was someone who I had linked one of my articles. They said that J.K. Rowling was right about everything. So I was like, well, here's my article debunking them. And they were like, oh, I'm not going to read your article. And I was like, well, it's sourced all the way through and nothing she said was sourced. So I think that that's a pretty nonsense position to hold. Anyway, they then went through and debunked my article in tweets, but they actually debunked the wrong article. They claimed to have read my big half-an-hour-long debunking one, but they didn't, and they debunked a different J.K. Rowling article I wrote, which was 4 minutes long. And they started off with this, and it really didn't get any better, but I just thought this one was hilarious. One of the sentences, I said, trans people don't deny that sex is real, obviously. They're just saying sex isn't this nonsense binary which determines every single thing about you. And I'm saying, well, trans people are saying it's more complicated than your ridiculous understanding. A bit like our friend from earlier who was saying you need a simpler textbook. We're saying, well, actually, it's more complicated than this. And a good example is how trans people are often very aware of all of the sex characteristics they have because, you've had to deal with them your whole life and they've been causing you pain in a way that they don't for cis people. But then on top of that, lots of trans people, most trans people, have researched loads of ways of how to change them. And like when you're starting hormones or having surgery, you obviously have done some kind of understanding and research into what sex characteristics are and why you want to change them and how it's going to improve your life. So I just mentioned that in this article, and this person's like, lie, no evidence, no source. And they are technically right that there is no source for the claim trans people are often more keenly aware of their sex characteristics than anyone else. I assumed it was trivially true. It's just like so plainly bad faith. Like this is the nitpick proving that what I'd written is wrong. It was a wrong article. They didn't actually address any of the sources I'd put in. It was just trying to tell me that this trivially true sentence was false. Nonsense. Anyway, so this is actually from a different article I've written about... So I've got an article called No, You Can't Always Tell Who's Trans. And it provides conclusive evidence to show that you can't always tell who is trans. Which is actually like another thing that's trivially true. But anyway, some people need it proving to them. And as part of that, there's this maths that I've done here. I've also provided loads of stories of trans people who have been stealth or have been blackmailed or all these various other things. But this maths is one piece of this article, and I just presented to this person. So if you're not a maths person, this is something called Bayes' theorem. It's just a very simple probability calculation. And basically, I go through here using some fairly simple maths, saying that even if you can tell who is trans and who is cis 99% of the time correctly, because there are so few trans people, the way the numbers work out, that actually means of all the people you point at and say, yes, that is a trans person, actually only just over a third of the time you would get it correct. which is interesting. And I think anyone who studied maths at like sort of higher education would see the numbers and recognize that, because this is a common probability pattern. But to a lot of people, they very naively think, oh, well, if I can tell 99% of the time, that means if I see 100 people, I will only get one of them wrong. But that's not actually how probability works. Anyway, so I said that, and I linked it to this person, and this person's like, maths isn't your strong point. And I was like, well, can you correct me then? And then obviously they couldn't, because I'm not wrong. So they said, I have never seen many men dressed as women in my time. Or I have seen many men dressed as women in my time, sorry. None passed. I'm not saying it's impossible that a very small minority might pass. Until they walk and talk, blah, blah, blah. They did that thing where they replied to themselves several times. Not in a chain, so it was hard to read. But anyway, I was like, that isn't maths, mate. That doesn't actually correct what I said. It's you saying, I can't always tell because I've never noticed when I wasn't able to tell. Which is, again, this classic, like our Dublin friend earlier, it's just this confirmation bias. It's like, well, I've never seen a trans person, so therefore they haven't been here. It's like, mate, it's because you can't always tell, and because you're not paying attention, and because you're an idiot. Probably in equal measure. So anyway, I was like, well, look, I mean, I've got an engineering degree. I always feel a bit like a knobhead when I say this, but sometimes it's worth just intimidating them into not trying this, like, oh, maybe you're wrong about maths thing. And it's like, the maths is right. Obviously, they've got no idea what they're talking about. And then they've come up with this amazing line. The maths might be right, but it doesn't change the facts. Maths is the facts. Like, maths is the most fundamental facts that we have available. What you're saying is, yeah, you've got the maths and the rest of the evidence in my article to back you up, but I'm right because I said so. And this is obviously a common theme, as we've already seen in this episode, and we've seen it every single week, how the gender critical position is so often just, well, because I said so, common sense, isn't it? Like, constant self-owns. It's amazing. Oh, and then they blocked me after saying that, which is also hilarious. So this is another example of someone doing something similar. And I think as soon as we read this one out, lots of people are going to know who this person is and why I've picked this emoji. So they've said, well, we're having a discussion about whether trans women should be allowed in women's toilets. And I've said, well, it's been happening for decades with no issues. And this person's asking, well, should we be allowed there? So they've said, I'm not asking whether they've been in there for decades without issues. I'm asking whether you believe the blah, 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 penis, blah, 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 blah. And this is just it. Like, I'm saying, look, I don't care about the fact that there's not been a problem for decades. What I care about is my little hypothetical scenario in which it sounds scary. Like, I've got to talk about teenage girls because I've got to highlight that, and I've got to say penis, I've got to highlight that because it sounds scary. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the fact that literally for my whole life, trans women and girls have been using these facilities, and this hypothetical scenario that I'm conjuring up, which sounds horrible, hasn't been a problem. That just doesn't matter to me. I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about my hypothetical scenario. And it's just rubbish. Like, you're saying, I don't care about the evidence because I have this little word game. Anyway, we've all seen this like bad faith nonsense, so I won't go into it much more. But this guy was quite funny. This was a gender critical person, but they were not as switched on as many. So anyway, I was talking to someone else saying about how you can't say, I'm not attracted to trans people. That's not a sensible claim. It's like saying, I'm not attracted to left-handed people, or I'm not attracted to people born on Wednesdays, or I'm not attracted to Aquarius or something. Like, it's not something you can sense. So it can't be part of your like innate sexual attraction. You know, if you look at someone, you can't just magically know whether they're left-handed and then suddenly not be attracted by it. Like some people you can look and you can make a pretty good guess, as we were saying earlier. You know, you can tell if some people are trans, but there is at least one person in the world who you can't tell whether they're trans or not. Therefore, it's possible you're attracted to them without knowing. So to say you're not without knowing that they're trans, and so to say you're not attracted to trans people isn't really a sensible claim. So I've just said, well, that's nonsense. And then this person's replied, completely destroying my argument with facts and logics. Lol, what the fuck are you talking about? They are 80 to 100 pounds heavier and 4 to 6 inches taller than the average women. Well, this is just, no, it's like, how do people think like this, where they think that because the average trans woman is taller than the average cis woman, therefore I can tell based on that, even though that means that some cis women are taller than the average trans women and some trans women are shorter than the average cis women. And obviously it's not like this, it's not a binary, like they love everything to be a binary. Like this, it doesn't make any sense. And even if it was, what are you then saying? Even just imagine all trans women were taller than all cis women and you could always tell just based on height alone. If it was just height, but otherwise, you know, that, I mean, this is such a nonsense hypothetical scenario, it doesn't really make sense. But if you get someone who's passing and they're just tall, and you say, well, it's likely they're trans women because they're tall, so you're really just saying that you're not attracted to tall women. So then it's not about being trans. That's just so ridiculous. The stuff they come out with. Like, imagine making this argument. What's wrong with you? So then he got pretty offended. So I was like, I actually feel embarrassed replying to this. This is so dumb. If the average height of a trans woman is taller, then does that mean they're all taller? Obviously not. Are you claiming that you just don't fancy tall women? Because that isn't the same thing, mate. And then he actually replied 4 different times to me, but this was the funniest one. I'll suck a woman's dick if it makes you feel better. I'll do that to be progressive. Ugh. I suspect this guy probably has some kind of thing going on, like lots of gender critical men do, with trans women, where they're sexually attracted and confused about it. This is complete ridiculous escalation. Like, we weren't talking about genitals, we weren't talking about blowjobs. It's just so nonsense. I'm not saying you have to be attracted to anyone. I'm stating the fact that if there's a property about someone that you can't sense, then you can't claim you are or aren't attracted to it. Like, your innate sexual attraction. Such a joke. Anyway, so this is one of the themes. We were talking about this earlier. So we were talking about our like fascists created trans people gender critical meme. So anyway, we've got the other side of the gender criticals and fascist meme, which is the most gender criticals aren't fascists. Most. It should be obvious that people don't feel comfortable with being replaced. That's why I'm against the white genocide. So for anyone who is new to the internet, white genocide is a Nazi conspiracy theory that trans people, it's a Nazi conspiracy theory that white people are being replaced by the Jews, or the Jews are trying to replace white people with black people or something. Like, it's so garbage. You can look it on Wikipedia, which actually has quite a good summary of it. Nonsense. But what's hilarious here, that the only people who believe in white genocide are fascists. Like, it's such a clear indicator. It's like one of the things that defines them. And this person's like, most gender criticals aren't fascists, but I'm a fascist. And then, like, it's just the perfect tweet. Like, first of all, they're saying most gender critical people aren't fascist. Like, that's already bad, mate. Surely, if it's a political movement, like, it should be incompatible with fascism. Like, I'm sure there are some fascist trans people, But no one fighting for the mainstream trans rights movement is a fascist, because they're literally incompatible ideologies. You could not be a fascist and support trans rights because they clash with each other. So it's really pretty damning, that first sentence, that gender critical and fascism don't clash with each other, which they don't, obviously, as seen by the rest of the tweet complaining about the white genocide. But anyway, it gets better. So he's like, white genocide is real and sterilization of the white population is an element of it. So what he's talking about here is a really specific and I guess new part of the white genocide theory, which is that, like, traditionally this white genocide theory has attacked feminists because feminists say that women should be able to get divorced and have abortions, and they don't like that because it lowers the birth rate of white people. But then also, like, they don't like immigrants and they don't like Jewish people, and they don't like everyone. But now, obviously, trans people are more widely known about. Trans people are obviously part of it. So they've got this idea that the Jews, obviously, have decided to create transgender ideology to get people to transition, particularly children, and make them infertile so they can't reproduce. So they've got this idea that being trans is like a white person thing, and it's people who have been brainwashed by George Soros to become something that can't reproduce and support the white race. So it's all interlinked, of course. It's all one big conspiracy. I can't remember, one of the like Nazi publications posted about it like in the last 2 weeks or something. It's the BNP or I don't know, Stormfront. I don't know what they're called. I can't remember. Did some article about this, and this guy's obviously read it and picked it up, which is quite funny. I mean, it's scary that the white genocide fascist people now know about trans people, but it's also kind of damning for gender critical. It's worth shining a light on this kind of nonsense, I think. So anyway, this was a tweet that I made, which has had quite a few replies, and it's worth considering our last two brushes with fascism in this episode, one sentence. So, as you probably know, this week a load of Trump supporters stormed Capitol Hill, which is a really important political building in the USA, while they were trying to certify Joe Biden as president. As is going to be inaugurated soon, American politics stuff. Everyone was talking about who's enabled this situation where like Nazis can storm the building in support of Trump. Like, it's an attempted coup. Like, it's scary stuff. It's failed for now, which is good. And the world kind of has seen what it is. But people have been saying, well, racism obviously is the largest like force to enable this kind of stuff. But transphobia has been a major thing. It is a like part of the culture war, which is horrible. But anyway, so I've also said, don't forget that a lot of prominent gender critical people endorsed Trump, which is true. That's just a fact. Quite a lot of them were pro-Trump, and we've had quite a lot of scuffles about it, and we might have even covered it in earlier episodes, I can't remember. And I gave an example of a lady from the UK called Posey Parker, who did something about she would vote for Trump if she lived in America. And it's scary because when it's just some random gender critical person, like, I mean, yeah, it's telling of the ideology and how, that's even possible, that you get people supporting these fascist people like Donald Trump. But when it's one of the like important thought leaders, like this lady is the one who popularized adult human female, the slogan, and also the I Heart JK Rowling t-shirts. And I was like, well, this is, it's kind of bad that happens. Anyway, I obviously got a lot of reactions to that, and none of the reactions were, yes, but she doesn't speak for us, or gender critical is better than this, or anything. It was just lots of angry denial. Lots of things like this. Sad to see people throwing hate at women who support what they want. Women should be able to stand for what they believe in and not get called names. And this is a common theme I see so much from gender critical people. And it's this kind of, I'm entitled to my opinion. And when they say that, they mean you're not allowed to criticize me. And it's so tedious. Like, they're trying to steal the language and appearance of feminism and wrap this reactionary anti-feminist bullshit in it. For example, supporting Donald Trump is just not a feminist position in any sense. So they're trying to do this, women should be able to have their own beliefs and like trying to make it sound feminist. But what they're saying here is women should be allowed to be fascists. And you're a misogynist if you call a woman a fascist, which is just mad. Like, it's just so clearly nonsense. Imagine writing this. Imagine thinking this. Like, I think that some people who write this are like, you know, coded Nazis or whatever, and they're trying to push this nonsense. But I do think that a lot of people who write this are just really ignorant and don't think about what they're writing. They've seen other people saying feminist language. They've seen that, you know, trans people who they don't like have accused their friends of being fascists. So they just use this defense that they understand, like, oh, I should be entitled to my opinion. Which then obviously means this kind of nonsense where you're just saying any opinion is good and you shouldn't criticize anyone's opinion, which is rubbish because some opinions are literally worthless. If you're a fascist, your opinion is terrible. So we need to call that out. So anyway, I got loads of this kind of reply. Here's someone else. So I'm saying, I was confronting someone on it and saying, you know, feminism is about freeing women from the patriarchy. And some women are opposed to feminism. And some women are part of the patriarchy or, you know, part of reinforcing it. And they're wrong because that's like the core position of feminism. But this person then says, no, women are free to have their own opinions. Same thing again, nonsense. I'm not saying no one's allowed their opinions. I'm saying that some people's opinions are worthless. And then they said, especially political opinions. You can disagree with them. That's fine. I do. But women having their own opinions has nothing to do with the patriarchy. What if your opinion is the patriarchy is good? Like the person we've just discussed. Like Donald Trump. Like all the people who support the patriarchy. Just no. And then they've said, I'm obsessed with liberating oneself from the patriarchy. Yeah, mate, that's because the patriarchy is the thing oppressing trans people and women, and it affects me. And you're part of it. And you're trying to defend me calling out here by saying, don't call it out. Got a load of quote tweets on this one as well. What a disgusting attempt to harness the chaos and anger at what is happening in America at the moment and direct it at women, you sad misogynistic prostate haver. Oh, it's so embarrassing. Just imagine writing that. It's just, oh, they're just trying to attack you and trying to make you feel bad and just failing so hard. I wouldn't say I was harnessing the chaos, mate. I would say that I'm pointing at the chaos and saying, of course, the racists are to blame here. They're probably the largest part. But don't forget that the transphobes and the homophobes are also an important part. Don't let some of the people who are enabling Donald Trump get away with that. And directing it at women, I'm not directing it at women, I'm directing it at gender critical people, or not even all gender critical people, some gender critical people, of which some were men and some were women. Anyway, I also like the second one. Here's Katie with another craven attempt to make sure that we don't forget that everything is now about trans people. What a loser. I just like the word craven. It's kind of a funny word. It's not that everything's about trans people, mate. I'm just pointing out that Donald Trump was gender critical, or at least compatible with gender critical views, and was not compatible with trans rights. As we all know, and we knew from the moment that he was elected, that he was a misogynist and a homophobe and a racist, and as those things always go together, he was a transphobe. And if you were supporting him because he was a transphobe, then you were supporting the misogyny and you were supporting the racism anyway, whether you had an opinion on that or not. And so the lady who we were just talking about, Posey Parker, this person said she exercised poor judgment in going on that alt-right podcast, and they're still using it as a stick to beat us with a year on. Very unfortunate. I hope she's learned a lesson. She hasn't. She's done other ones and other things, and there's a whole list of evidence, and she hasn't changed her position. I just think it's funny, like, oh, all I did was that one time be a guest on an outright podcast. Like, I'm not going to be invited on as a guest for an outright podcast because my views aren't compatible with the alt-right. And gender critical is, obviously. Like, come on. In fairness to this guy, I linked all of these people, all of this evidence, and they all denied it. And this guy didn't. And he was like, I didn't realise that it was more than once, and I didn't realise how bad it was. I don't think he came around to my position, but he did at least back down from this position. So congratulations, I guess. Oh dear, I hope we got this whole quote. Oh yes, okay. Right, okay. I got them mixed up. I started 2 tweets in a row with did he. So I'm saying, do you support Trump's positions on trans rights or not? And then this is yet another one saying, how very feminist of you. If you try and silence Posey Parker and control what she can and cannot say, you're a pathetic handmaiden. Imagine trying to claim to be a feminist and then calling a woman a pathetic handmaiden. But Poise Parker, it's a good typo. But also, this is so classic. This is a thing they always turn to. They'll say, oh, this is my bullshit opinion. And then you say, your opinion is bullshit. And then they're like, you're trying to silence me. It's like, I'm not. I haven't got the police to arrest you. I haven't called on the state to ban this type of talk. What I'm saying is, what you're saying is bad. And it's always like as if I'm trying to control what you can say or not. If you feel controlled by me pointing out that your fascist ideas are fascist, that says more about you than it does about me, I'm afraid. Anyway, so this is my other Did He tweet, and this one's amazing. So, actually, I'll go through this tweet first, and then I'll explain this guy, because he's hilarious. So, he loves my desperate attempts at something I don't even know. I love your desperate attempts. Ian Watkins from Lost Prophets said he supported trans rights. So do we now make that comparison? Of course we don't, because that's just stupid. Just like this tweet. I presume he meant my tweet, but just like his tweet, yes. So I was like, did he? What? Ian Watkins from Lost Prophets has a position on trans rights. Anyway, I was like, so this is the same tweet. Do you support Trump's positions on trans rights or not? So this guy then said he did, talking about Ian Watkins from Lost Prophets. And he's like, I haven't read into Trump's attitude on trans rights. As if. But even if they were similar to mine, that doesn't make me like Trump. It just means I agree with him on one issue. And then another attempt at the argument. Hitler was a vegetarian. Are you going to start aligning with vegetarians with Nazis? So this is the classic argument. When you point out that someone is ideologically aligned with someone on something, they always try Hitler being a vegetarian was absolute classic. The issue is that the ideology behind Hitler's vegetarianism isn't a problem. That isn't actually an issue with the world. Vegetarianism is a good thing. His other position, one he's arguably more famous for, his Nazism, as an ideology, is terrible. All of it is bad, and even if you agreed with just half of it, that would be bad. The only good position is opposed to Nazism. So this isn't actually a good defense of you're aligning with Donald Trump on trans rights. The reason you're aligning with Donald Trump on trans rights is because both you and him support the patriarchy and are opposing minority rights, because it's a reactionary position. It's your political position is that of a reactionary transphobic person. And that's why you agree with him. And that's probably why you agree with him on other things and you're just pretending not to because you know it's bad to. Anyway, so rubbish take. But it was quite funny about the Ian Watkins because I was like, really? Did Ian Watkins from Lost Prophets really support trans rights? This doesn't. I haven't heard from him in ages. So I googled Ian Watkins trans rights. And the top post was Ian Watkins from Steps supporting trans rights, which quite a few people then pointed out and were like, mate, did you get Ian Watkins mixed up with Ian Watkins? Which is hilarious. He did. And he went on to deny it a few times and he doubled down and he tripled down. And a few hours later, this was the first tweet that he mentioned this on. He was like, I'll say this one last time. I promise he hadn't said this before. I have no idea what his stance on trans rights is. Then why did you say it? My point was just that it's possible you could agree with a horrible pedo on a particular issue. It doesn't mean you're a horrible pedo. Yes, but with the Hitler vegetarian thing, if you agree with a paedophile on their diet, that's not an issue. If you agree on them on their idea of consent, that is an issue. Obviously, rubbish argument. But anyway, I just thought it was so funny that he got the Ian Watkins mixed up and then tried to defend himself for ages and then tried to bottle out. But anyway, this guy is obviously one of these gender critical men who has a thing for trans women and is angry about it. I mean, you just get that vibe from certain guys. And I commented about it and he flipped out and he went down all of my posts on my timeline writing something angry on several of them, replying to other people I'd retweeted. Nothing to do with a tweet. Like I've retweeted someone saying something and this guy's come and replied to them hours after saying, like, Katie's obsessed with wanking, she's just accusing me of wanking. And he was like super defensive about it and it was really funny. And he absolutely humiliated himself. And he's been angry ever since and he spent all day today having a go and it was utterly hilarious and I enjoyed every moment of it and now he's deleted his account. So that was good. So this is, I think this is the last one. So how are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing quite well. So this guy said, I think that can here is a typo and he meant to say can't. Trans women can't be discriminated against. To be oppressed, you need a system oppressing you. Trans women are part of the patriarchy and there's nothing like white supremacy or heteronormativity oppressing them. I wonder what's a bit like heteronormativity that oppresses trans people. Is it cisnormativity? Like, this is just so embarrassing. Like, there's nothing that oppresses trans people. And then you're part of some, like, hate cult, which is trying to remove the rights we have today, take away healthcare, stop us from being able to, like, work in the military and have housing. Like, you're part of it. But to just deny that, just to claim there's nothing that oppresses trans people, even if you, like, ignore all that, then there's still the fact that trans people are killed for who they are all over the world. Like, in some countries, it's literally illegal to be trans. In some countries, like, you know, trans people get sent to prison or get given the death penalty. It's just next level denial that you have to, like, people get themselves into the state. You don't get, like, this isn't a position you get to just from ignorance. You don't like first learn about a trans person and then go, nothing oppresses them, because you would spend 5 minutes on the internet and a trans person would say something like, I don't have the right to do this. You're trying to take away my right to do this or something. And you would understand that there's some kind of oppression going on here. And it's just this kind of cult view where you have to get more and more extreme and you have to deny that trans people are oppressed. You have to deny that the Nazis killed trans people in the Holocaust. You have to deny all these other things, and you get to the point where you're claiming that there's literally no oppression of trans people. It's just ridiculous. Like, you don't get here just from ignorance alone. And for sure, you need to be motivated by hate, but you need also this like propaganda echo chamber telling you that these views are like even partially rational. Because just like imagine, the loads of these people at the moment are trapped at home, like all of us are, and so they're only contactors with their little internet cult. Just imagine going into your workplace and having your water cooler talk or whatever and be like, trans people globally aren't oppressed. Like, even people who don't give a shit about trans rights would be like, what? This is nonsense. It's such a joke. Anyway, I think that was the last one. Let's just double check. Yes, it was. Thank you very much, everyone, for sticking around through all of my terrible technical difficulties. So frustrating. I'm going to try and find out what causes my internet to drop out, though I have looked before and I really don't know. I'm also going to work out what this. I'm probably going to get a new app. Basically, I was using an app on my phone to change the slideshow, and I'll probably find a better way of doing it. I'm sorry, we've not had one episode without technical difficulties. Next week is going to be the first episode without technical difficulties. Come tune in. I would love to see you here. I've really enjoyed all of this, doing this, even when there's technical difficulties. And if there is technical difficulties next week, then I will donate £11 to Stonewall for every mess up I have. So then we're all winners. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I love all of you. I'm just going to do a shout out to my friend who gave me these lovely earrings for Christmas. Thank you, Gemma. And I will see you all soon. Love you. Bye.